Hey guys, it's Luke-Yan, and today I am going to be filming a very long, what is sure to be a very long, and what is a very overdue reading wrap-up. So I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in February, March, and April of this year. I apologize for kind of ghosting my YouTube channel, but as some of you may know if you were like an avid, long-time watcher, I'm actually a senior in high school, so I spent much of, like, the past year visiting and applying to colleges. In March I was hearing from a ton of schools, and it was just a very stressful process, and I didn't feel like filming, so it was, like, kind of hectic, and I just, like, time really got away from me. And then in April I was visiting some of the schools that I got into and trying to decide where I was going to attend. Yeah, so finally I know where I'm going. I couldn't be happier. I'm so excited. I just had like my decision day photo sort of thing at my school where like everyone takes photos with each other in their school sweatshirts and everything. That's really exciting, and hopefully now that the college application process is over and done with, I will have loads and loads of time to devote to reading and doing videos and everything. I'm currently in the midst of AP exam week, so that's something, but after that I'll be completely free and all that stuff. I still have school and stuff obviously until like the end of June, but I'm gonna have way more time on my hands than I did before. So yeah, this is gonna be a very long video, so buckle up, get some tea, get a snack, because we're gonna be here for quite a while. The first 3 books that I read in February were the 3 books in the Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare. So I read Chain of Gold, Chain of Iron, and Chain of Thorns, and I actually have dedicated videos to each of the books in this series. So I have a review and recap of Chain of Gold, I have a spoiler-filled reading vlog for Chain of Iron, both of which were rereads for me. And then I also have a dedicated reading vlog to Chain of Thorns, which was the first time that I read this book, and I loved this book. I ended up giving it a full 5 out of 5 stars. You can see some of my, ton of my in-depth thoughts in that video, so I'm not going to get too much into it right now, especially since we have a lot of books to cover, but I loved this book. I thought it was a great finale. It's not my favorite book in the series, but I still was really satisfied with it, and I'm super happy to finally have, gotten the final book in the series and to have finished it. Then the next 2 books that I read, I also have dedicated videos for, and those were This Woven Kingdom and These Infinite Threads by Tahata Mafi. So last year I did a full spoiler-filled reading vlog for This Woven Kingdom, and I did the same for These Infinite Threads. This was a reread, this was not. I gave both of these books 5 out of 5 stars. I love them, and you can catch tons of my thoughts in those videos. The next book that I read was Chicken with Plums by Marjane Satrapi. This is a book from the author of, oh my god, what is that book called? Persepolis, which I read a couple of years ago and really enjoyed, and this book follows a man who decides he is so depressed that he is going to fall asleep forever, and it is a graphic novel, and it's loosely based off of the author's uncle, which is really interesting. I really enjoyed this book and like all of the themes and messages that it presented. I thought it was really beautiful, the way that some of the panels were drawn and the way some of the things were told, and like all of the metaphors that were used to describe certain things. I really enjoyed the main character. He felt very real, which is obviously like expected because it is based off of the author's, off of like a real life person that the author knew. And I really enjoyed like the plot of the story. It's a very quick read. I do feel like some of the other characters fell a little bit flat. Like I don't really remember much about them anymore. But I did really like the story. The ending did confuse me a little bit, so that's one thing that I want to note. I just feel like this book was kind of confusing at times, and like I didn't always understand like exactly what was happening, which is probably because it was so like metaphorical. But I did really like the way it kind of like put you in the main character's shoes, and I do think it is a very solid read and one worth picking up. Next I read Galatea, I think is how you say it, by Madeline Miller. This is a short story that follows the story of Pygmalion and his wife. I started reading Circe by Madeline Miller a couple of years ago, and I just never got that far into it. I wasn't like really enjoying it that much to like want to continue, but I do want to like start the book over and read it like completely. But this is a book that I just like saw on Scribd and I really wanted to read it, and I really enjoyed it. I actually ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Oh, I think I forgot to mention, I gave Chicken with Plums like 3.5 out of 5 stars. But Galatea I gave 4 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed all of the characters. I thought the story was written in a really interesting, kind of mysterious way. I love, like, all types of mythology. I don't love Greek mythology, like, the most, but I do really enjoy it, and I like a lot of the stories. I didn't know a ton about this particular tale that's being retold in the short story, but I did really enjoy it. Probably more than I would have if I, like, knew the story really well, but I really enjoyed this book, and I think it's a really good thing to, like, introduce you to, like, Greek mythology retellings, and I thought the prose was really great. I really liked the characters, and it's a super satisfying read for being so short. So, like, if I can rate such a book, like, such a short book, 4 stars, I feel like it's a really solid short story because it, like, has to pack in a lot for me to give it such a high rating. Then I read The Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. This is, like, a short story that, or, like, a little novella that is told in the same world as Sorcery of Thorns, which I read a couple of years ago, and this book is kind of like a longer epilogue. It's like a novella that kind of tells you what happens after the events of that book, and I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it like a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and I really liked returning to the characters. I liked learning a lot more about Thorn Manor, and I do really enjoy Elizabeth and Nicholas. I love Silas so much. He's like the star of the show for me, and I loved the little epilogue at the end with his perspective. I just thought this was a really cute book, and I think if it was like 250 pages, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but since it is like so short, I feel like it had like a limited amount of time and space to like fit in a complete story, and I feel like I do need that when if I'm gonna like rate a book highly. I feel like it should have like a complete, it should be like a book, not just like a little tack on thing. But I did really enjoy it for what it was. Then I read Emma by Jane Austen. I read this book for my AP English Literature class because throughout the year we had to pick an author to do an author study on. We had to write 2 essays on 2 of their books. So I read Sense and Sensibility first. I read that in like November of last year, I think, and then I chose Emma for my second one. And I really enjoyed this book. It was kind of like, it's kind of hard to talk about because I think I gave it 4 stars, but I feel like I do need to reread this and Sense and Sensibility since I was reading it more like from a student's perspective than just like a reader, and I think I would have liked this book even more had I been just reading it for enjoyment instead of like trying to find things, trying to analyze things and trying to find things that would like turn into a successful essay. But I did really like this book, and I am excited to reread it in the future. I really liked Emma as a main character, and I think this was a good book to like write a paper on. It was like, there were a lot of things that I could have chosen, and I ended up settling on like how Emma's perception of the world and how like the way she interacts with other people and views them as like her puppets to play with kind of like gives the reader, like, it was this whole thing. Like, I don't honestly even remember my thesis like too in depth because I did write this paper like 2 months ago, but I got 100 on it, so Emma served me well, I guess. I do really like Jane Austen, and it is a goal of mine to read all of her books, and I think if you're looking for classics that are still really great in today's world, definitely pick them up because they're definitely worth reading. And then the final book slash short story that I read in February was My Evil Mother by Margaret Atwood. I ended up giving this short story 4 out of 5 stars. It's my first like work that I've read by Margaret Atwood. I do really want to read The Handmaid's Tale, and I also own The Blind Assassin, so I definitely want to get to those very soon, but I don't want to say anything about this book because I went into it literally knowing nothing, and it's only like 30 pages, but it's on Amazon for free. It's like a Kindle Unlimited book, so definitely check it out if you can because it's a super fast read, but it is amazing. Like, I loved this book so much. I love the main character. The way that this book was told and like the way it reveals information slowly to the reader over the course of like those short 30 pages was amazing, and it just made me want to read The Handmaid's Tale and The Blind Assassin even more because I think the way that Margaret Atwood constructed such a short story and made it so like impactful and like used so much of those 30 pages was really, really impressive. So really enjoyed this, definitely recommend. I usually don't even like short stories like this, the ones that are like super short, the Amazon ones. I've read a couple of them, and I haven't loved any of them, but this is definitely one to pick up if you can. Moving into March, the first 3 books that I read in March was an entire trilogy actually, and that was the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han. So To All the Boys I've Loved Before, P.S. I Still Love You, and Always and Forever, Lara Jean. And I was not like ever intending on reading this series. I bought it a really long time ago and I owned it, and I kind of like I gave it to my sister because I was like, you can read these. I'm not really in the mood because I know she really enjoyed Jenny Han's previous series, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and so I was like, you'll probably like these too. That was like honestly around the time that the movie came out, so a really long time ago, and I kind of forgot about this series, but for some reason, it was February, it was Valentine month, I wanted some like cute, fluffy, contemporary romance, and so I decided I would pick this up, but then I didn't even get to it in February, so I decided to read it first thing in March, and I really, really loved this series. I ended up giving each of the books 4 out of 5 stars, like 4.5 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I think I did give all these books like 4.5 out of 5 stars. They're really amazing. It's like one of my new favorite series, and I honestly really want to reread it in the future, which I don't usually do with like contemporary books, especially like lighter ones like these, but I loved this series so much. I love Lara Jean. I think she's such an amazing character. I know a lot of people are really annoyed by her, but I think she's really great, and I love all the characters in the series except Kitty. We won't get into it. That girl really annoys me and like grinds my gears, honestly, but I really liked Peter Kavinsky. I thought he was a very realistic character. Honestly, these books were very realistic. Like, yeah, there were like obviously things that would never happen in real life, but like the people in these books, like the characters, were very realistic, and I loved the plots. I was on the edge of my seat throughout all of these books, even though I knew exactly what would happen in the first book because I have seen the movie, but the second 2 books, I loved them so much. But To All the Boys I've Loved Before follows a main character named Lara Jean Songkavi, who has had 5 crushes in her life, and to kind of get over her thirsting, she writes letters to all of these boys, but she never mails them out. She actually puts them in a hat box that her late mother gave to her, and right now she is in high school, and she's kind of just trying to figure herself out, and especially in the wake of her sister leaving for college, because her sister is going to the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, which is really far away from these characters who live in Virginia. And so Lara Jean's kind of trying to find her footing again with her older sister gone. She's trying to like deal with her younger sister and her dad and like this new reality. And one day these letters accidentally end up getting sent to all of these boys, and Lara Jean has to reap those consequences, and she ends up getting into a fake dating relationship with one of the boys that she sent a letter to, because she needs to convince another one of the boys that she sent a letter to that she is not still in love with him, because he is actually her older sister Margot's ex-boyfriend. So it's a tangled web of drama. This book definitely follows the fake dating aspect a lot more, and I loved this so much. It was such an amazing like first book in a series, and it just really set the table for everything really well. Then P.S. I Still Love You. I was expecting not to love this book as much because a lot of people said this was their least favorite book in the series, but I really enjoyed it. I don't know which one is my favorite, because honestly they're all pretty equal in my head, but I really enjoyed this book. I liked the way that the story progressed, and I liked the love triangle in this book more than the love triangle in the first book, and I don't know, I just thought that this book was a great continuation. I'm glad it was not the finale like it was intended originally, but yeah, I loved this one as well. And then Always and Forever, Lara Jean, I really liked also because it deals with college, and Lara Jean's trying to figure out where she's gonna go because Peter is going to UVA for sports, but she's like trying to figure out, oh, should I go to UVA? Am I even gonna get in? All that sort of stuff. And I loved this one a ton as well. I think if I had to rank the books, I would honestly probably put them in this order. I'd probably put the first book first, second book second, third book third. But they're all pretty equal in my head. And again, I give them all like 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's an amazing series and I would definitely recommend it. And then after that, I actually read the Summer I Turned Pretty series by Jenny Han because I just really wanted more of her books and I wanted to watch the television show, and I felt very lukewarm about this series. I really liked the first book. I ended up giving it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a great summery read with some like deeper themes like in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series, and I thought it was like pretty dynamic. I liked all the characters, but then the second book was like a little bit weird. It was told over like a very short period of time, and I didn't love all the plot points and everything. And then the third book just became so weird and unrealistic, and I didn't understand it, and it put me in a reading slump, and I had no idea what was going on, and I was like, is this a different author? How did this happen? I was so confused. So I gave the first book 3.5 out of 5 stars, I gave the second one 3 stars, and I gave the third one 2 stars. But this series follows a main character named Belly who goes to this summer house that her mom's best friend owns every single summer, and it's always her, her mother, and her brother going to see her mother's best friend and her 2 sons, and Belly's kind of trying to figure out, like, oh, she's like starting having feelings for both of them, and it's this huge love triangle thing and all that. So yeah, I think it was probably a great series like when it first came out, but it doesn't age like super well, and also it's just kind of weird and uneven, like the series and like the quality of the books. I was definitely on a series kick because the last book that I read in March, and then the first 3 books that I read in April, were the books in the Hunger Games series by Susan Collins. I know that it's crazy that I never read these books before. I could have sworn that I actually had read them like at some point, but I think I just like gaslit myself into thinking that I read these, and I never did. I'm sure you all know what the Hunger Games books are about, so I'm not really going to explain them to you, but I loved the 3 main books in the series. I love Katniss as a main character. I love the way that these books are plotted, and even though I knew everything that was going to happen in these books because I've seen the movies like a million times, I was still like really, really invested in each of the books, and I just really, really loved it. And I think that this series is a staple in YA for a reason. It's a classic, and it's so good, and it's like, it's warranted, like, all of the praise that this series gets and all of the dedication of the fans and everything, because it's so masterful. It's like the best dystopian series I've ever read in my life. If I had to rank these, I would probably say Catching Fire is my favorite. Then, honestly, Mockingjay. I know a lot of people don't like Mockingjay, but I loved Mockingjay. And then The Hunger Games. Then, I guess we have to talk about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I despised with like every fiber in my being. Even the movie trailer doesn't look that good, and I'm like, come on, Susan Collins, like, we know the potential you have, and she flopped. Like, this book is such a major flop that it hurts, and I gave this book like 1.75 out of 5 stars. I had to genuinely force myself to read the last third of this book because it was so painful. All 3 parts of this book were like equally bad and boring, and I can't even get into it because there were so many ways that this book could have been great that Susan Collins just didn't take advantage of. First of all, it's told from Snow's perspective only, and it's told in 3rd person. My philosophy is that if you only have one perspective, just tell the book in 1st person. Like, it's not that difficult. Also, The Hunger Games is told in 1st person, so like, I don't really understand that. I don't like the timeline of this book either. I feel like it should have took place over multiple Hunger Games, and it just didn't. And Lucy Gray was the most cringy manic pixie dream girl character I've ever read about. Snow had no development. I can't talk about this book without getting really angry and annoyed because I just want to forget that I read it. I want to forget that it exists and just view the Hunger Games trilogy as the supreme Suzanne Collins series, and I don't want this to taint its mark on the world. The next book that I picked up was The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. This is a mystery book that is next to impossible to describe. This is going to be a very messy summary of this book, or like synopsis, but basically, bear with me. So, the central mystery of this book is that these 2 people named Tallulah and Zach end up going missing on one summer night. They end up vanishing from this party. No one has any idea where they went. The police have been searching for them for about a year. And we have Tallulah's perspective in the past, and it's kind of like leading up to this party, and obviously at the end reveals what happens. And then we have Tallulah's mother, Kim, in the present timeline, and she is actually taking care of Tallulah and Zach's young son. They were both very young when they had him, and Kim is young herself. She was very young when she had Tallulah, and so she is now the, like, sole caretaker of her grandson, and she is convinced that there was something nefarious surrounding her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend's disappearance, but a lot of people think, oh, you know, like, they just couldn't deal with the responsibility of having a child, and they ran away. But Kim doesn't believe this because she knows how much her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend loved their son, and she knew this would never happen. So she is trying to figure out what's happening at the same time that a new woman named Sophie moves into town, and she is the girlfriend of a professor at this college that Tallulah actually went to. And Sophie is on a jog one day when she goes into the forest and sees a sign that says "dig here." So she and Kim kind of team up to figure out what happened at the same time that you're reading chapters from Tallulah's perspective from the past. I know that was a very long explanation and a very jumbled one, but this was a great book. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I think I forget how much I enjoy mysteries until I'm, like, actually reading one, but I really liked this book. I loved the writing style in this book. Lisa Jewell has a really beautiful way of, like, describing scenes and describing characters, and I really liked all 3 of the different perspectives. I didn't love Tallulah in the beginning, but once it starts to get, like, more frequent in the second half of the book, and once secrets start being revealed and, like, the plot starts to unfurl, like, it became a lot more enjoyable. This book is one of those books that, like, leaves a lot of different clues, like, throughout, and, like, every chapter has a little reveal, and you kind of slowly build up the tension until you reach, like, the climax of the book, which I really enjoyed. And I really applaud Lisa Jewell for telling and not showing, because I feel like the ending of this book could have been a lot of, like, explaining and villain monologue and all this sort of stuff, but it was written in a really great way to the point where it, like, eliminated any of that, like, telling and not showing. So yeah, I really enjoyed the characters, I really liked the writing, I thought the plot was great, and I think the resolution of this mystery is a really interesting one, and I'm definitely happy that I decided to pick this up. And I think if you need, like, a more slow, like, it's not super fast-paced, I wouldn't call this book a thriller, but if you need, like, a good mystery where you can kind of follow the clues as they're being left, I would definitely recommend this book. Then I read Love and Other Carnivorous Plants by Florence Gonzalez. I have this book right now, but I'm actually returning it because I ordered it off of Amazon, and this was not the cover that was advertised, and they sent me the wrong one, so whatever, I'm not salty about it, but I'm probably not gonna, like, repurchase a copy, so I'm just gonna, like, return this low-key. But this book follows a main character named Dandelion, or Danny, as she's known, and this is actually a YA contemporary book, I forgot to mention that, but she and her best friend Sarah have had this plan for years that they would go to the same college and all of this stuff, but one day, Danny actually finds out that she was taken off of the waitlist at Harvard University, and so she decides to go there instead, and ever since, her and Sarah's relationship has been a little bit frayed. But this book actually takes place after her first semester of college, and she actually dropped out after her first semester to go into treatment for an eating disorder. So this book follows her in the summer after that as she's trying to figure out, you know, what she's going to do after recovery, if she's going to go back to Harvard, how she's going to deal with Sarah, and also her relationship with one of Sarah's friends that she introduces Danny to. So I enjoyed this book. I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, or like a 3 out of 5 stars. I first saw this book on Hannah from A Clockwork Reader's channel, and it seemed really interesting, and I've been wanting to read it for so long, and I just finally decided to bite the bullet and do it because it's just been, like, on my, like, TBR for a really, really long time. And I enjoyed it, but I do think that it was, like, I do think I was expecting a little bit more, or, like, something different than what I got. First of all, I have no idea how this girl got into Harvard, because she makes the stupidest decisions I've ever, like, read about in my life. She just, like, has the hottest takes, she makes the most interesting choices, and her decisions are so questionable, like genuinely. Like I don't get it how she's like lived this long, genuinely. I mean, like she was definitely a well-written character, and like she's not like a likable main character. Like the author didn't want the reader to be like, oh my god, I love Dani so much, I want to be best friends with her. Because she hurts a lot of people, she makes really bad choices, but it just got to a point where I was like, girl, come on, like snap out of it, get back into reality. What is happening? Pull yourself together. I just couldn't really relate to her, like, at all. Like, I don't know, it was just hard. But I liked some of the other characters in this book for sure, and I honestly did like the plot. I thought, again, it definitely took, like, turns that I wasn't expecting, and, like, went down roads that I didn't think it would go down. But, I did enjoy it for the most part. There were, like, some things that I wasn't like the biggest fan of, but I think overall, like, it was a pretty good story. I will say though that the first half of this book and the second half feel like very different books. Like the first half is a little bit more lighthearted. She's kind of trying to figure out what she's gonna do. She's like meeting new people, making friends, trying to find herself. And then the second half is like tragedy strikes, and it just continues for the rest of the book until the last chapter where everything's like good and dandy. So I feel like that was a little bit interesting, and I feel like maybe Florence Gonzalez had like two different book ideas that she just decided to like mash together. I don't really know. However, this book is really, really funny, so if you need like a contemporary book that has like some darker themes and like some more serious undertones, but that is really funny, I would recommend this book. I do genuinely think it is a good book, and I think it is a good debut. It's just the main character, kind of got on my nerves at times, and I do think that the plot was like a little bit uneven. The next 5 books that I read were the books in the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. I know I'm only holding 3 books right now, but I read The Crow Prince, which is the first book, The Lost Sisters, which is a novella that takes place in between book 1 and 2, The Wicked King, The Queen of Nothing, and then How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. I do own that book, it's just upstairs. But I decided to reread this series because I wanted to finally get to The Stolen Heir by Holly Black, which was her most recent release in this, like, fae world. And I have been meaning to reread this series for a really long time, and I'm so glad I did because I ended up giving all 3 of these main books 5 out of 5 stars, and then I actually raised my rating for both The Lost Sisters and How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories from 3 to 4 stars. But The Cruel Prince follows a main character named Jude, and she was about 7 years old when both of her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were taken off to live in fairyland. One of her sisters' name is Taryn, and she is Jude's twin sister, and the other one is Vivi, who is half fae and the biological daughter of one of the fae in Elfhame, and the man that actually ended up kidnapping Jude and her sisters and killing their parents. So this book follows Jude as she is kind of dealing with court life and being hired as a spy, and dealing with the cruel prince named Cardan, who is one of the 7 heirs to the throne of Elfhame, which is soon to be unoccupied because Cardan's father, Eldred, is stepping down and giving the crown to one of his children. So this book is kind of hard to describe just because there's a lot of things going on, and like a lot of different characters and a lot of backstory and all this sort of stuff. But I'm sure you know what this series is about just because it has absolutely blown up on BookTube and TikTok and everything, and it's definitely worth it. I love this series so much. I'm only holding up the first book right now just because it's like easier, but I loved all of these books equally. I thought they were so amazing. I love Holly Black's writing. I think the way that she crafts this world and the way that she describes everything is so clear and vivid, and I just really enjoy her writing style, and I liked all of the characters in this series. I think Jude is a great, like, protagonist. She's not, like, the most likable person on the planet, but, like, she has her goals, and she's really ambitious, and she's willing to do what she needs to do to achieve her goals, and I really, really like Cardan. I really like the romance in the series. I think it's really good, and it's, like, interesting, like, an interesting dynamic for, like, a fantasy series, and, yeah, I just really, really love the series. I think it's really interesting and twisty, and all of the books are really, really good, and I would definitely recommend it. I mean, I don't really know what to say about the series that a million people haven't already said before, just because it is so popular, but I jumped on the bandwagon, I guess. I used to be like one of those cool people that didn't like this series, but now I have joined the train. Then after reading those books, I actually decided to finally get to The Stolen Heir by Holly Black, which is the first book in a new duology set in the same world as those other books. And this book is following a main character named Surin, who is kind of like living feral. She was born and like grew up in the human world, but she's like, well, no, she was born in fairy, but grew up in the human world, and then was taken back to fairy as a young child, and now she has like escaped her two like fairy parents who like put her on the throne of the Court of Teeth, but she was like a puppet queen because they were just doing it so that they could like rule, but it was like this whole confusing plot line. Again, like a lot of backstory to like explain a lot of characters. And Surin is living feral in the woods, and she one day is approached by Prince Oak, who is the like true heir to Elfhame, and he offers to take her on a quest to save his father and defeat her mother. So I loved this book. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars as well. I love quest books so much, and I think that this one was a great one. I loved all of the characters in this series. I mean, in this like first installment. I think that the plot was so interesting. It was a little bit slow like here and there, but I was still really interested in all of the different like stops along the way that they made like to get the quest. It's like kind of like a heist book almost. And I just thought it was really action-packed. I think Holly Black definitely played to her strengths in like descriptions. She really like went for a lot of the descriptions. Like I knew like always where we were. My only complaint with this book is that I do feel like sometimes it was a little bit like hard to, like I would kind of get pulled out of the story. I don't really know why, but sometimes I would just like lose my attention, or like my attention would be lost. So that's like the only bad thing I have to say about this book, because I really, really loved it, and the ending of this book like solidified 5 stars for me. It was so good. It was such an interesting like way to close out the book, and I'm super excited for the next book, which is actually going to be told from Oak's point of view. After that, I read The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black, which is a standalone novel that is kind of like about fairy also, and it follows 2 main characters who are brother and sister, Hazel and Ben, and they live in a town that sits on the edge of like the human world and fairy, and in the woods, or like in the forest of this town, there's a coffin where a man has been sleeping that is like a fairy for centuries. And one day, the fairy ends up waking up, and it's all this drama, and Hazel and Ben are kind of at the center of it, and they have to figure out what to do from there. I really enjoyed this book as well. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is a super like whimsical fantasy book. It kind of felt like I don't know, like, almost like The Night Circus or, like, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, like, that sort of fantasy feel, but, like, with, like, a high-action YA plot as well, with, like, knights and everything, and fairies, and all of that. But I really enjoyed this book. I love books about siblings and, like, the dynamics between them. I thought this was really interesting, the way it blended the human world and fairy, and, yeah, I really enjoyed all the characters. I thought the plot was really interesting. It wasn't like a perfect book for me, but I don't have any like specific issues with it. The next book that I read in April was Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is a book that's been on my TBR for a really long time, and I was in the mood for like a quick thriller book after reading a ton of like fantasy books, and I really enjoyed this book, and I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I read it so fast. If you need like a book to just like fly through, definitely pick this one up. It takes place in the 90s, and it follows a main character named Charlie, who ends up, you know, advertising that she needs a ride home from Ohio because she is planning on dropping out of college because she has had a lot of trauma in her life. Both of her parents were killed in a horrific car crash, and her roommate Maddie was just brutally murdered by someone known as the campus killer, and so she's just like done. She needs to go home and escape college, and she ends up running into Josh, who offers to give her ride home to Ohio from the college in New Jersey, and she is kind of just in the car, and she slowly starts to realize some shady things about Josh and start to question whether or not he is actually who he says he is. So this book has the most tension I've ever read in a novel ever in my entire life. It's so good. All of the characters were really, really interesting. I know a lot of people like hate Charlie and think she makes horrible decisions, but honestly, like, if you were in the situation, do we know how we would really react? Probably not. And I don't know, I just thought she was great, and I thought the book was really, really interesting. Like, just the plot, all of, like, the different, like, places that we go to in the book, just the way it's told, it's so fast-paced. Like, you can honestly read this book, like, in a single sitting if you really wanted to. And yeah, it's just a really great thriller. I don't want to say too much about it just because there aren't a ton of characters to talk about, and like once you get like too much into the plot, you might end up revealing some stuff just because there are like reveals all throughout the book, and there's like tons of them. So yeah, definitely pick this one up. It's really, really good. I ended up giving it like 4.5 out of 5 stars, honestly, and I'm super excited to read more from Riley Sager. Then, the second to last book that I read in April was Inheritance by Katharine McGee. This is a novella, a prequel novella set in the, from the American Royal series. I have been wanting to continue on with the American Royal series for a really long time. I read Majesty in 2021, I think, at the very end of that year, so it's been over a year since I, like, read a book from this series. And I know the third book came out like last year, so I wanted to read Inheritance to kind of just like get reacquainted with the characters, and it did a really good job of that. I liked that this novella was set like during one night, and it kind of like reintroduced me to everyone in the world and everything, and I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. But the last book that I read in April was actually Rivals by Katharine McGee, which is the third book in the American Royal series, and I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I loved the characters in this book so much. It's easily my favorite book in the series, and it honestly made me want to give the first 2 books in the series another shot, because I rated the first book 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I rated Majesty 2 out of 5 stars, so I'm interested to see, like, if I would enjoy it more now, because I really liked Rivals. I thought all of the characters, all the 4 different storylines were really, really interesting. I love the way that Katharine McGee, like, plotted everything. I actually gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I forgot. Like, I was like, thinking, I was like, I should, like, raise it from 4, but then I remember in my Goodreads I said 4.5, so yeah, it was really, really good. And I liked, like, Beatrice in this book is dealing with the League of Kings, which is kind of like it's basically like the United Nations, but for like all of these different countries with all these different monarchies. And like Nina and Daphne are kind of dealing with stuff together, and Samantha's trying to figure out what to do with her relationship, and it's all really, really interesting. This series is so dramatic, and I love the way all the characters intertwine. I read this book in one day. It was so addicting, and just all the different plot lines were so interesting, and I'm super excited for the final book in the series, because the ending of this book was insane. But those are all the books that I read in February, March, and April. I don't even know how many there were, but I know for a fact I read 7 books in March and 15 books in April, so that's at least 22. And then I think I read, like, I don't even know, 10 books in February, so that's 32. A lot of books to talk about, but yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will also link all the videos that I mentioned, like all those videos talking about some of the individual books in this video. I'll put all the links in the description box, but that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. All my social media links are in the description box below, and I will see you in a new video very soon. Bye! Are you recording? Yeah, but I can edit it out.
Today we have a guest star.
You know, this is all getting taken out. Like, all of it.
It can go in the blooper reel.
Okay, can you get out, you freak?
I have read
No books.
many books. too short. I'm currently reading The Violence. I don't know who it's by. It's pretty good thus far. I've also read, it's called A Breakup Because It's Broken.
So concerning.
What else have I read? I've read so many things.
The Dead Romantics.
No, I haven't finished that yet. I've read 3 Women recently. It's pretty good. I
What
read
3 Women
My
is it
Year
about?
of Rest and Relaxation. That was crazy. A lot of poetry books. Yeah. So, it's been real joining you today.
Okay.
We are here to talk about
I'm gonna like leave all of this in. Leave it out.
Today on Lukey's channel. His sister.
She doesn't even know what my
Exposes
channel's
him.
called.
It's called Lukyan's Library.
Okay, never mind. You're such a freak. Goodbye. I need to
The
make sure
talent just left. The real stuff.